Sì, assolutamente. Trascrizione. Non c'è? Grazie molte. Okay, thank you so much for understanding. Now we have solved, I hope, definitively our technical problems. So, for the purpose of registration, I would like to introduce once again Dr. Ram Tiwari. Ram Tiwari is Executive Director of Nepal Forum for Restorative Justice. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation to this 10 years lectures series. Dr. Tiwari will deliver a lecture on restorative justice and its cultural unrooting, reflection from Nepal and South Asia. Ram, once again, thank you. As I give you the floor.
Well, thank you, Professor Grazia. I am very honored to be here. Just to check, hope you can hear me well. Is it loud enough?
Yes, can you hear you clearly?
Thank you. Well, it's absolutely an honor, and probably Breno Chang will also agree that we were also included, and it's our honor to be with us in this very important initiative that the center has started. With that expression of gratitude, let me begin my presentation, my lecture. First of all, let me also tell you very candidly that the title is very ambitious. Why we put that as it is to actually question certain underpinning, certain practices that we have been facing while we promote this movement of restorative justice in Nepal and the region. When I say region, I'm mainly talking about South Asia, since we are very connected and we share our practices. But I'm also looking forward to suggestions of sometimes feedback, sometimes questions on how we are thinking, how we're framing this, and how this can be taken forward. Let me share my slide.
Share screen. We can see that.
Can you see this one? Yeah. So basically, when we say cultural unrootings, I try to suggest that we have had a very long connection with the cultural realm when we talk about restorative justice, and we see that happening more. But as we are working in the field, as we practice this, as we translate the UN handbook, say for example, or many textbooks on restorative justice, for example, we find that, well, there are not so linear paths from culture and restorative justice, and sometimes that's an opportunity, sometimes that's not, and that is what I'm trying to discuss here. Well, we know that generally restorative justice is understood in three foundations. One is the cultural foundation that, well, many of our non-Western, non-white societies already possessed certain forms of conflict resolution mechanisms, certain forms of community justice mechanisms, certain forms of traditional practices, how we handled our conflicts or sometimes harms that occur to us. So it is also an implication that we had already some inbuilt practices within us that has helped us build restorative justice, or that has flourished to what we know today as restorative justice. So the implication, the meaning of this is such that some cultures, which we discuss primarily in various contexts, say for the Canadian culture, the Native American culture, or the Maori culture, or the Aborigines culture in Australia, or various other cultures in various continents, they already have restorative justice in them. And so, for example, the Mennonites promoting restorative justice, for example, or others promoting restorative justice is understood as an extension of their own culture, and the modern restorative justice is just built on those foundations. That's what is understood. The second is the context of criminal justice, where we see that restorative justice emerged from a situation, from a learning that there has been overcrowding of prisons. Well, the overcrowding, the term itself is a misnomer, I would like to say, but there has been a crowding in prisons. There is a high rate of recidivism. There is also a high and very important, not to miss, dissatisfaction rate of victims. The recidivism and victim dissatisfaction are one, but there is also revenge happening when they go back to society after they are sent back from prisons. So something has to be done to see to see to see what's best. The crime rates are rising, and prisons are also getting crowded. So something isn't working, because this had to be more inversely related than otherwise. If prisons would work, crime rates would drop. That was the context from the 1970s and 80s. So it prompted to this idea of thinking for alternatives, and we have restorative justice going from that premise. The third one, I believe many of you know, is the incident that happened in Ontario, in Canada, in Kitchener, in the 1970s, where the experiment that the probation officer or the police officer did, that was to initiate a dialogue between the teens, the youngsters who had caused harm to the cars, and those who were harmed. Those cars were harmed. So instead of punishing, or instead of trying something that is traditional, the probation officer and his team tried to initiate a dialogue, and there was surprisingly forgiveness. There was surprisingly no confrontation. There was surprisingly no revenge. So we tend to see restorative justice from these three pillars as we see today. And we also when we promote restorative justice in our context, we certainly acknowledge all of these three foundations. However, what happens is we also put a lot of focus on one over the other, although we mention all of them. And when we talk of restorative justice, we have seen this very overly used picture of people, especially children, living in a circle, showing the circleness of restorative justice on the one hand, but also showing that restorative justice has not so white, not so European, not so American, not so Western roots. And we hear a lot of this, which I will also discuss in the later presentations, that in Africa, especially the concept of Ubuntu, or the practices of certain restorative values in Rwanda, which is, as far as I know, was restorative, wasn't restorative, but we tend to think that this symbolizes the restorativeness of the African cultures, non-Western cultures, Oriental cultures, Asian cultures, or other cultures of the global South. That is what we see, and we see that, well, we had this practice, and we had this idea called restorativeness or restorative justice, although we didn't have that name. We didn't have that name, but we had this idea that we had to talk to one another when something happens. We had to sit in a circle when something happens, and we have to solve. Well, that is how many societies have survived. Many societies have evolved. However, if we look at this in our context, now I bring my context. We see there are certainly more caveats than that claim. So this is a picture from 2014, as you can see, well, more than 10 years ago, where we had organized a South Asian level conference or meeting of judges and practitioners in Kathmandu in Nepal. What we have then tried to do was, well, when we see that South Asia already has a lot of potential for restorative justice, why not bring practitioners and judges together, and let's do something together in restorative justice, since already there is a potential. So we had representatives from all these countries, and also some very senior, like Chief Justice and Supreme Court justices, including one from Sri Lanka, as you can see in the picture. That was the gathering. We also had we also had some invitations, and we could invite Sujata Balika, if you know her, my very revered colleague and a friend and a guru, and also Carl Stauffer from Eastern Menard University in the US, since we wanted to see the South Asian understanding from Sujata's point of view, and the Eastern Menard EMU's teaching and its leadership on restorative justice from the Western point of view, and having these practitioners, judges together to see what looks like what looks like possible in South Asia. So what came out from the discussion was that although everybody agreed that all of our cultures in South Asia had many values akin to restorative justice, like talking together, dialogue, trying to find solutions inwards, not having court or formal justice, alternative solutions, not having those kinds of punitive measures, or not seeking those kinds of punitive alternatives. We have those cultural, let's say, foundations to start restorative justice or to promote restorative justice. Many of us were amazed with ourselves, or surprised, should I say, with ourselves, in the fact that all of us countries were lenient to formulate any laws about it, and laws about restorative justice, or policies about restorative justice. And why I'm saying that is because all of the countries, because we had justice professionals from formal justice systems, they had seen how crime looked like in each of our countries, how prisons look like in each of our countries, what overcrowding meant in each of our countries, what access to justice meant in each of our countries. All of us knew that we had problems in our criminal justice system, and we had our cultural roots, yet there was no connection. And not just a lack of connection, but the willingness to take it forward. So that occurred to me pretty deeply, should I say. So we had two distant restorative justice values, but we didn't have any law till then in South Asia. However, the connotation from the meetings, from the conclusion from the meeting, was that we should start, but no one knows who will. Although we have potentials. Well, it might be contingent on various reasons why laws and how laws are made or promulgated. That is a very different reason altogether. But what I'm trying to say is that since our preparedness is already there, how can we tweak this to make something that is more adaptive to our context? That was the question that all of us asked. And if you look at it, this year, 2024, from that year 2014, we've hardly made any progress in South Asia. Why I say that is because South Asia represents a continent or subcontinent where we have a strong gender-based violence. I'm not saying it is the only place it has, but we have that. And the gender-based violence are based on various harmful practices, very strong patriarchal roots, sometimes the untouchability towards certain women in certain stages of their lives, stigmatization against women, or sometimes against single men. There is also a lot of caste and feudal practices in many countries. Well, you can call it caste in some countries, you can call it a different practice in another country, but we find that too. And if you look at the roots, these have also long roots. There is power holding of certain groups in each of our countries. They have been in power for a long time, and that power holding hasn't gone because that is very deeply rooted. And if you look at the criminal justice side, from the community side, we still see that there is overcrowding. Actually, the prison population has been increasing. So in the last 2 decades, the data shows, the UN data says that the prison population has increased by 47%, while the population has grown by 31%. So there is still overcrowding happening. Not just that, recidivism and accountability are still very big questions that we're facing. And also on top of that, the center of the justice system, the victims have been expressing dissatisfaction in various ways. And overall, the access to justice is a big issue in the region. So if you put these two together and see that why are we not able to use the already existing foundation to solve the modern day criminal justice problems? Probably there is a silence. And that is where we have to ask questions. And I'll tell you from sort of anecdotes in our work how we have tried to address that, although without not very big success. Because we see that in India. Let's begin from Nepal. In Nepal, we have an age-old practice of melmilap, which actually means mediation or sometimes reconciliation. So when something happens to people in the community, people gather together and they try to find solutions that work for all of us or people involved. However, if you look at it from a deeper level, you'll see that it involves certain group of people more than others. That is still power dominated, or there is a big power configuration. You'll also see that the barriers, the caste barriers, the power barriers that underplay in these kinds of cultural structures have been very stable. They are very strong. And after all these centuries, we see marginal progress in dismantling this. So although we used to have this system of solving our issues ourselves, there were also many issues. In India, you can also see from our 2021 book chapter where we write about South Asian context and restorative justice with our friends from India and Bangladesh. There is also the similar idea of gram panchayats, or even before that, panchayat, which means that 5 people, the learned, the leaders, 5 people sitting together to discuss certain ideas that have been certain problems that have been raised. So that was their practice. However, if you look at that, there is also some domination. It sometimes get political, meaning the power political, not partisan political, but it gets very political. There is a stronghold of certain groups than others. We can find that too. We can find similar structures in Bangladesh. We also have community mediation practice in Bangladesh, and we find that the gender-based violence and the harmful practices were found in the ancient traditional community forms. We also find that similar mediation practice in Sri Lanka, trying to build on the cultural foundation of mediation, which had a strong ethnic, strong gender, strong power undertones. And if you look at Pakistan and Afghanistan, to which our lead Ali Gawhar has worked, you can see that we have this system of Zirga, and it is again, coming together, discussing what has happened, trying to find a solution. However, there is representation of certain gender more than other, and that barely gets into policies, or that barely gets into the structural transformative routes or forms, so that they become very episodic and they become a reinforcement of what was already happening in culture, although that that was harmful to certain groups. And we find similar practices in Bhutan, and I don't know very much of Maldives, but I can say from the literature that Maldives also has a lot of strong roots of solving our disputes together, and the roots mostly based in Islamic philosophies. In Nepal, this idea of solving disputes together, aka restorative justice, has been sometimes called very old practice, and many people, especially when we went to the communities to work, well, going to communities sometimes sounds very farcical, but when we were working in communities, people would always say, this thing called whatever you are trying to say by restorative justice, we already have that. We don't need that anymore. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, so to say, because we are already doing that, and this is very historical, this is very age old, so we don't need to reinvent that again. In other words, we don't restore justice because we already practice that. And that idea of mel milap, or the cultural roots to solve disputes together, crimes together, harms together, were later translated to other forms. So for example, they were translated later to legal judicial practices, or forms such as mediation. We have now a mediation law, which mainly talks about interpersonal disputes, civil disputes, not criminal ones necessarily. We also have arbitration law, which is very much about commercial disputes, and we have reconciliation, especially to deal with the issues of transitional justice, post-conflict justice. So if you look at the cultural practices not needing restorative justice versus the evolution of legal frameworks to address sometimes disputes, sometimes reconciliation, we see that something wasn't enough, or something that had to be more, that had to be rethought, that had to be re-engineered, and that was done. Because if we had put community mediation as restorative justice, or disputes to be solved by themselves, or reconciliation that could happen by itself, we would not need these kinds of laws and judicial measures. And why I'm saying that is because after the promulgation of all these kinds of laws, we have made it more standardized, and the victim satisfaction rates, access to justice, they have increased. So deep down in communities where people were marginalized, where people were disenfranchised, where people were out of the power for so many years, for so many centuries, these laws have assured that there's a space where you can resort to, although you can do that without telling your community leader, or telling somebody who holds that power as a gatekeeper in your community. We have that practice. And if you look at this in Nepal's case, how that evolved from 2014 onwards, how that has evolved is that in 2015 we had a new constitution. The new constitution, in Article 21, has very clearly mentioned the right to restoration, especially for crime victims. So when we say that, it becomes a foundation for us to push for victims' rights. Although it's very much about the rights of victims, it is also a room that opens spaces for restorative justice. When we say restoration, or there's another word in Nepali, which could be rehabilitation or restorative justice, we can use that room to promote restorative justice when we say victims have that right. How? Because when victims have to go back to communities, or when they are in the community, there is a fear of revenge or retaliation from the perpetrators. So there has to be some arrangements made. Not just that, restoration can also happen from emotional and also from the psychosocial healing processes, and these rooms are opened by the constitutional provision. The more specific law that came 3 years after the Constitution has been the Children Act, and there in Section 39 it mandates that the juvenile justice has to be dealt with restorative justice principles. So this gives a clear-cut room and a mandate to use restorative justice in affairs of juvenile justice. And what has followed after the act is in that hierarchy is that we have now divergent guidelines. There's also the juvenile justice administration regulation, and now we are developing the restorative justice guidelines, which is an umbrella guideline to implement restorative justice. So if you look at this evolution, none of these were developed because we had cultural roots, or there is no direct cultural how do you say that implications in this evolution. The need was felt because the need was very strong in the criminal justice system. There was a strong victim rights movement. There was strong jurisprudential awareness that victims' rights have to get it in a certain way and in a more progressive way. When we say in a more progressive way, that meant that something such as restorative justice should come in place. And when we say rights related to children and restorative justice, it was not because of the cultural roots. It was necessitated by the fact that children in Nepal, especially those who are living in the juvenile justice centers, so juvenile detention centers or the juvenile correction homes, have been facing a lot of problems, and the call for like non-punitive, non-custodial measures coming from the global scale, we heard that. So that was the calling. We tried to respond to the modern criminal justice problem than otherwise. And when we talk of diversion and restorative justice guidelines, we are also trying to solve certain criminal justice problem that we are facing now. So if you look at the other aspect of criminal justice system in Nepal, we can find that this approach of using restorative principles, not in the law, not specified in the law, but you can use that in other ways. We find that in this framework, what we call hard framework. The hard framework is a framework that we have been using to at least try to work on some parts of the criminal justice needs, healing needs for victims, say for example, empowerment needs, the accountability that has to be done for the harm doers, restoration of dignity, the restoration of relationships, sometimes restoration of trust, restoration of mutuality, and the transformation of the cause meaning why the crime or the conflict actually happened. This framework or the spectrum that you can see, we have been using that in various forms. So for example, in juvenile detention, juvenile correction homes, we use dialogue, we use circles to sit with them to try to see how they feel accountable, how they see the crime from the victim's side, and when we do that, we've seen a lot of inspiring results from that. And there is also another big part in Nepal which we called post-conflict context. Post-conflict context or transitional justice context since 2014 has been halted, but we see that in communities where we had people fighting against one another for apparently political reasons, but now as the years pass by from 1996 to 2006, that was when we had conflict. There's a need for reconciliation, and the reconciliation here again, the law is there which says that reconciliation can be done, and it facilitates or it gives rooms to do these many kinds of circles with conflict survivors, dialogue with conflict parties. So these are also happening. Restorative justice has been used to deal with community conflicts, such as using dialogues, where not necessarily we call that restorative justice, but we use these principles and values and try to bring people together, build bridges between people when there are divides. So my assumption and my contention as of now is that, well, culture is a foundation. Culture is a foundation, but not the only foundation. So when we try to put all our stress on the cultural readiness or the cultural appropriateness, probably we run some big risks. If you look at Nepal's examples and South Asia's example, we see that in other countries in South Asia, we see there is an evolution towards restorative justice laws now, policies now, some programs now. Although we had that apparent cultural foundations already, but there is a need to formulate that to solve the modern conflict, modern criminal justice problems. Um, the risk that I was mentioning is the risk of romanticization. Why I say that? Romanticization, because we see a lot of structural violence in certain cultures in our country, in our subcontinent, where one group holds power for a very long time, and there is structural injustice, and there is negative peace, if we have to put it in Johann Galtung's way. Well, there's the people are apparently living very happily. There has been no conflict, major outburst of conflict, because people have been harmonious in nature culturally, or they have been cultured like this. Well, this kind of portrayal is sometimes overstretching what we are. I believe that culturally stereotyping will sometimes cause more obstacle in progressing restorative justice than facilitating. And also, well, when we say culture is there and we can start restorative justice, what we're trying to say is that culture does give easy inroads. And this culture, when is basically the culture that we didn't have prisons built. We didn't have the courts built. We didn't have the strong criminal justice apparatuses built. Therefore, we can go for an easy option or a better option of infusing restorative justice, infusing reformative measures, and make things happen the way it works for people affected by crime or conflict, right? So in Nepal, we progressed a lot in restorative justice, not because we had a culture there. We are trying to use restorative justice in prisons or in other criminal justice settings, not because our culture was ready. We had a culture. We had a culture that that we became less or late westernized. Our prisons and our justice systems are not very old. In fact, the first chief justice in Nepal and the first law that came in Nepal in the modern phase were very much inspired by the British or Indians. The chief justice had to be brought from India because we wanted to follow that adversarial Western model of hierarchical justice system. Well, there was this late entry to the justice system or the justice discourse, but before that late entry, it was not sacrosanct. It was not free of any defects. We had certain defects, but we were also asked to bring start reforming criminal justice or modernizing criminal justice system by studying courts and having lawyers, having Supreme Court chief justices, and so on. Many of our laws were how do you call that? Transposed. They were transplanted from other countries, from especially taking reference for India. So there was a drive towards modernity, but that was a late drive towards modernity. And when we try to build prisons and without having the strong foundation of criminal justice administration, we went wrong. So in 50 years, in 60 years, all of our prisons became overcrowded. There has been no corrections. Corrections hasn't entered into the scene. Juvenile justice system has been in this array because we wanted to use the Western international models while at the same time forgetting what we can do internally. So having that cultural background and having that unclear entry towards the modern criminal justice system caused a problem, right? So that is why we find it's easy to go back, revert certain practices and go back to our culture plus restorative justice practices that can work very well. My contention, therefore, is that let's put culture as an important foundation, but over crediting culture to promote restorative justice might cause some harm, because cultures are not homogeneous entities. There are many layers within culture. There are many culture within cultures. So it might run the risk of generalizing and not trying to see not trying to see the needs of individuals who are involved or affected by crimes or conflicts in community. So culture has to be seen in a more nuanced way, and in a very heterogeneous way, so that the justice that we're trying to discuss now, the justice that heals, the justice that makes people accountable, becomes real, becomes more human. Otherwise, it will be lumped again in the big cultural paint, and the individual needs, that the need for accountability, the need for healing, the individualized needs that we have been trying to focus so much on restorative justice will be hidden. They will be there. They'll be sidelined. So thank you. If you have any thoughts about it, please let me know. I'll be happy to discuss and also actually reflect on your thoughts. But that is basically my proposition from the work that we've done and from the experiences that we've gathered so far.
Thank you so much, Dr. Iwari, for your thoughtful presentation. I have only some consideration, and if you agree, we will promote the discussion in the second part after the second lecture, also for the purposes of recordings, because from this room it's very hard to hear correctly all the voice and record them. So I suggest to move the debate at the end of both lectures. But for now, I would like to deeply thank you because of the several reflections you promoted through your very interesting presentation. First of all, the connection between restorative justice and culture, which is not linear. And I think it is a crucial point because we should not, as you said, romanticize the connection with culture. And I also highly appreciated what you said about the network efforts we need to promote restorative justice by putting together the judiciary and restorative justice practitioners. I strongly believe that they should talk. They should understand each other, because the judiciary and the restorative justice practitioners speak two different languages. And the first issue is to find a common language to deal with justice, with conflicts, with past and with future, because criminal justice system is mainly focused on the past and on the reaction, and restorative justice is mainly focused on the promises for the future, on how to transform injustice relationship into justice relationship. And I also appreciated a lot what you say about power as access to justice and the role of democratic barriers, of, for example, castes. And I wonder, but we can speak about it later if you like. I got the impression from your presentation that restorative justice seem to be rooted in the same culture that that contains and that perpetuates some democratic barriers. So we have this contradiction. And at the end, I would like, I would be very interested in reading your constitution that recognizes a victim right to restoration. I think it is a fundamental step that all constitutions should achieve. And I would be also very interested in reading the Restorative Justice Guidelines 2024. If you can share a link to that document, it would be highly appreciated. And I appreciate a lot what you said about the relationship between restorative justice and culture, and the progress you are doing, not because of culture, but sometimes despite or independently from culture. And that gives hope to the Italian legal system, because restorative justice here is not so deeply rooted. We have some philosophical, some theological roots, but they are not so strong as those of the Asian culture. And I think there is a hope in West society that restorative justice can promote a changement in culture, even if it is not relating to strong, big, ancient roots. Have you some consideration on what I said about your presentation, and then we will move to the next one. Would you like to add something, Ram?
Well, you perfectly summarized and also highlighted some aspects that I had raised. What I wanted to add just to your point is, we have been very cautious of calling what is restorative justice in Nepali, because the literal translation of restorative justice in Nepali sometimes doesn't make meaning. But when we unpack that to suggest what it suggests, people easily make a sense of that, right? So the need to call restorative justice anything, versus the need to also call restorative justice in the way that the international, the modern criminal justice thinks is important. We could call it anything, but we have tried to call it something that is very technical sounding. But we don't use it everywhere we work. We use that in certain spaces where that is understood, say with judges, with judiciary, or with lawyers. We use that technical term. But when we work in communities, say for example community circles and others, we don't use that term. We bring in the need for healing, bring in the need for accountability, without calling that restorative justice. And like you were saying, there doesn't have to be a linear tie or the marriage between the culture and the restorative practices, without using that name that we're trying to practice in community. So the name, when to use, when not to use, is also very important. But sometimes it's very important to use that name because it suggests something specific of the modern criminal justice system, or the need for changing certain things in the modern criminal justice system.
Thank you so much. Really, we have, I can say on behalf of everyone, we have learned a lot from your reflection and presentation. Only for the purpose of recording, I remember that Dr. Ram Tiwari is founder and executive director of the Nepal Forum for Restorative Justice, through which he has worked to introduce and establish restorative justice system in Nepal in both formal, judicial, and community settings. And he has collaborated with the United Nations also in formalizing United Nations Handbook on Restorative Justice programs. Now it's time to listen our second prominent guest, which is Reynolds Chang. Reynolds Chang is a scholar and practitioner in restorative justice. He is currently a PhD candidate at the School of Regulation and Global Governance at the Australian National University, where he also serves as a researcher at the Center for Restorative Justice. Reynolds' research focuses on restorative justice, juvenile justice, gender equality, and policy. Reynolds was also accomplished as restorative justice facilitator in Taiwan and worked as a police liaison officer with the Taipei City Police Department. His work has been dedicated to promoting inclusiveness and raising awareness of gender equality within Taiwan's justice system. He collaborates closely with Taiwan's Ministry of Justice and Judicial Yuan to advance restorative justice through publication and work. Reynolds, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. I give you the floor for your presentation titled Restorative Justice in Relational Landscapes, Development, Theory, and Future in Taiwan, Asia. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Professor Grazia Manotti, for your kind introduction. And let me firstly try to share my slide. Oh, can everyone see my slide?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so thanks once again, Professor Grazia Manotti, for the invitation, and thanks also to your team for organizing this event. Hello to Ren and everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to come together tonight and share and discuss restorative justice in Asia. I'd like to begin by celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Center for Restorative Justice and Mediation Studies at the University of CeSGReM. This is a significant milestone reflecting your center's valuable contribution to the field, and I'm looking forward to the next decade of your work and the continued flourishing of restorative justice. And in this session, I'm taking you to Taiwan, an island society in East Asia, located between Japan and the Philippines and close to China. And it's wonderful to see that even though we come from different parts of the world, we are all come together to promoting restorative justice. And in today's lecture, I try to address one key puzzle. How is restorative justice understood and practiced in a Taiwanese context? And today I will focus on the field of juvenile justice, and how can these experiences inform broader theories and practice of RJ? This question is crucial because I want to find ways to help address juvenile offendings in ways that are not stigmatizing, and restorative justice seems to be one approach. However, it was developed in the global north, so what does equity look like in Taiwan? I will be addressing these from an academic lens as part of my ongoing PhD research at the Australian National University. My research is grounded in fieldwork conducted in Taiwan, including in-depth interviews and observations with justice participants and practitioners. This approach aims to provide a holistic view by capturing the voices of those responsible, those harmed, their support networks, as well as judges, probation officers, facilitators, and social workers. Before we dive into detail, let me outline my overall arguments, which unfold across 3 levels. At a macro level, I argue that context is crucial for understanding and practicing restorative justice. It's essential to identify participants' needs within the local context and provide a tailored response. At a meso level, which is the institutional level in this study, I argue that Taiwan's juvenile justice system reflects institutional hybridity, offering multiple pathways for participants, especially juvenile, to address their diverse needs. Similar to climbing different mountains, and RJ dialogues in particular focus on addressing emotional and relational harm in ways that traditional trials cannot. And at the micro level, I argue that restorative justice in Taiwanese juvenile justice can and should function like a ladder, fostering transformation of self-reflection, shaming, and relationship healing. It's worth noting that instead of testing existing theories, I'm proposing 2 theoretical frameworks at 2 different levels. Okay, let's start with a brief overview of the current development of restorative justice in Taiwan's justice system. The Ministry of Justice launched Taiwan's first government-led RJ pilot program in 2010, initially focused on adult cases. Then in 2019 and 2020, the term restoration was officially embedded into Taiwan's legislation for the first time, including the Criminal Procedure Code, the Juvenile Justice Act, and the Prison Act. As a result, RJ in Taiwan is now applicable to both adult and juvenile cases and can be implemented at the prosecution stage, trial stage, and the correction stage. In terms of RJ models in Taiwanese juvenile justice, there are 3 main models developed by 3 major RJ service providers. As you can see in my slide summarizing these models, although they use different facilitation techniques, what they have in common is that they have all integrated techniques from counseling and psychology into their practice. Particularly, those can help with the issue of shame. They have also all placed an emphasis on restoring the relationship not only between the juvenile responsible and those harmed, but also the relationship between the juvenile and his or her family members. Given this, you might wonder, why has restorative justice been interpreted and practiced in this way in Taiwanese juvenile justice? To answer this question, and to better understand RJ in a local context, I argue that we should take a step back to see the tree within the whole forest. This requires understanding human behavior and institutions through their contextual lens. Harry Carrington's concept of sovereign criminology highlights that crime, victimization, and justice are shaped by regional specific factors, historical, social, economic, and political. At the macro level, each society presents distinct challenges, needs, and strengths, shaped by its local contextual dynamics, including embedded social norms and historical trajectories. Therefore, I argue normatively, restorative justice as an approach to address harm and foster healing is necessary for us to understand the influence of contextual factors on RJ in the local context. In other words, we need to understand the specific needs of participants within local context and how RJ can, or perhaps even should, respond to these needs in ways that tailored to the nuances, conditions, and needs of each community, field, and person. This is similar to how a doctor diagnoses and treated wounds, providing a tailored response to the specific circumstances. And what distinguishes Taiwan from other societies where RJ is well established is its cultural foundation of relationality. Unlike individualism prevalent in many global North societies, Taiwan's social fabric is defined by deeply interdependent relationship and an emphasis on social harmony. Let me offer a few examples to illustrate these cultural traits. In many English-speaking countries, people typically call each other by their first names. In contrast, in Taiwan and many other parts of Asia, addressing parents, bosses, or elders by their first name is often considered impolite. Instead, Taiwanese people predominantly use titles or seniority-based terms. This everyday communicative practice is an example that continually reinforces relational awareness. Another example is the shared sense of group honor and shame. In Taiwan, when a children makes a mistake, it's common for parents to publicly apologize and sometimes even face social criticism due to their children's misconduct. The reverse is also true, with adult children often bearing the weight of their parents' behavior. While the culture of relationality that is prevalent in many Asian societies appeared to align with the philosophy of restorative justice in a way that emphasizes social ties, I argue that relationality can be a double-edged sword. Through further analysis, I found that this characteristic is reflected in the interplay of three core concepts in a Taiwanese context: shaming, self-reflection, and relationships. The way these concepts interact can arguably be crucial in determining whether an individual can successfully reintegrate into society. This arguably also related to why and how restorative justice can be effective in a given context. So let me take you through into detail. First, shaming, a concept drawn on John Braithwaite's theories of reintegrative shaming versus stigmatizing shaming, has significant implication for Taiwan. In Taiwanese society, especially within the family or kinship relationships, shaming is often used as a tool for disciplining or communication. However, if not used consciously, it can easily result in stigmatizing shaming. Let me share some statistics to illustrate this. A 2019 Child Welfare League Foundation survey revealed that 33% of juvenile and 70. Oh, yes.
Sorry. We are wondering if you are moving on with slides, because what we see is only the first slide.
Oh,
I don't know
I see.
if it is your choice or there is a technical problem.
Okay, let me try again.
Could you try to share again the screen?
Yeah. Let me do that.
Chat and the screen is stuck in the first page of the presentation and the PowerPoint presentation. I'm sorry I have interrupted you, but just to improve our understanding of your presentation.
Yeah.
Oh, we can. Okay, perfect. Try to move on. If we can see something else. I don't know if you are moving on, but we see the slide with double-edged sword of relationality only.
Can you see the full screen of my slide now?
We see your slide, but we see only one, and I don't know if you are going on. Yes, now we see the change. Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, great.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
No worries. Yeah. So I continue from these three elements that I think is the core three elements in the Taiwanese context about relationality. So yeah, so the first one, shaming, which is in color green, you can see on my screen now, is a concept drawn on the John Brevis theory of reintegrative shaming and stigmatizing shaming. And this is quite influential for Taiwanese society because in Taiwan, especially in the family or kinship relationship, shaming is often used as a tool for disciplining and communication. But if it is not used consciously, it can easily result in stigmatizing shaming. Yeah, so here are some statistics to illustrate this, is that there's a survey conducted by the Child Welfare League Foundation in 2019, showing that 33% of juveniles and 72% of adults in Taiwan experience verbal violence as discipline, including threats and humiliation. While parents intend to teach consequences and encourage self-reflection, this approach often backfires. 83% of juveniles report at least one negative responses, with 61% feel angered, 36% feel devalued, 33% want to resist and seek revenge, and 23% consider self-harm. So these leave young people feeling like they're fallen off a cliff and parents feeling helpless. And the second one, self-reflection. In a Taiwanese society, shaming is often closely linked to self-reflection. I define self-reflection as a process by which individuals absorb the more moral and social norms they acquired, reflect on their own mentality and behavior, experience a sense of satisfaction or dissatisfaction with themselves. Not only shame and pride, but also other emotions such as anger, grievances, and frustration, and generate meaning and direction for moving forward. However, I argue that self-reflection, like shaming, can take two paths. Constructive self-reflection leading to empathy, apology, and correcting misbehavior, while destructive self-reflection can result in low self-esteem and even self-harm. In a Taiwanese society, the process of self-reflection is often influenced by relationships, where the expectations and pressures of family or significant others can drive self-reflection to different paths and outcomes. And the third, relationship. In Taiwan's relational culture, relationships are often hierarchical with various power dynamics. I argue that relationship also exists on the spectrum between dominant and non-dominant. In dominant relationship, where one person exerts control over another, power imbalances may intensify the feeling of stigmatizing shame and weaken an individual's capacity for self-healing. For example, when a parent or partners adopt a controlling stance, the person on the receiving end may feel helpless, hindering their reintegration into society. In contrast, non-dominant relationships where power is more balanced foster healing through mutual respect and understanding. These three concepts, namely shaming, self-reflection, and relationship, are not isolated but interrelated. For instance, when someone is labeled as a bad person, stigmatizing shaming may develop, which may lead to destructive self-reflection, make someone thinking, oh, everyone say I'm bad, so I must be a bad person. This negative self-image can be reinforced by dominant relationship, where dominant parents or partners may say things like, you are a disgrace, or you lose my face, don't come back home, which may further trigger defense mechanisms such as avoidance, self-harm, or harming others. On the other hand, if a person is also stigmatizing shame by others, but through the support of positive relationship or constructive self-reflection, for example, thinking everybody say I'm bad, so what am I doing wrong and how should I adjust? And he and she will have the opportunity to make adjustments and reintegrate back into the community. That is to say, in a culture such as Taiwan, the interaction of the three could lead to the positive reintegration process, but could also, and arguably more often, lead to a negative process that is downward, particularly between young people and their families. Accordingly, I propose a theoretical framework suggesting that in such context like Taiwan, restorative justice at a micro level can act as a ladder to support transformation. This means fostering the transformation of shaming from disintegrative to reintegrative, self-reflection from destructive to constructive, and the relationship from dominant to non-dominant. Emerging literature highlights that young people involved in criminal incidents are often immersed in environments where intense negative relational dynamics, making restorative justice crucial for facilitating positive change. And here I present a case from my fieldwork to give you a glimpse into the process. The trajectory you see on this slide maps the emotional and relational dynamics of the case. As we follow these lines from left to right, you will see how restorative justice transforms relationships that were once hostile and filled with despair into opportunity for healing. And let me take you through this journey. It begins with what known as a Romeo and Juliet case, which refer to situation in some jurisdiction where a young person under the age of consent engage in consensual sexual activity with someone of the similar age, but their legal guardian doesn't support this decision. In this case, it involved a 17-year-old boy and a 15-year-old girl who met online. What might have remained a private family matter escalated when the girl's mother discovered the incident by checking her daughter's phone without permission, leading the mother to initiate a lawsuit to protect her daughter. This case involved a web of strained relationships. The girl and her mother had a long history of tension, marked by physical discipline and trust issues. The mother's unilateral decision to pursue legal action against her daughter's wishes deepened the rift between them. When asked about attending the RJ conference, the girl's response captured her sense of powerlessness. She said, "I don't know. You can ask the person in the room," which referred to her mom. She can make a decision. Initially, the girl's mother was very resistant to the RJ process. The mother, already overwhelmed as a single parent caring for 2 children, saw no value in restorative justice. In her eyes, the boy was simply a monster deserving harsh punishment. Yet the breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source, the grandmother. The RJ team took a unique approach. As one facilitator explained, "We did not frequently tell the grandmother something like, 'Come to the conference,' or introduce the process. We just do one thing: care. Care about the current situation of the girl. Care about the current situation of the mom." This sincerity resonates with the grandmother, who began to see that the team truly wants to help. Slowly, the grandmother convinced the mom to engage in the process. The mom's interest grew when she learned that the process might help repair her relationship with her daughter. The boy's story added another layer of complexity. Raised by a single father after his parents' divorce, he initially approached the process with a mix of willingness and defensiveness. His lawyer had suggested the girl's history of other boys made the incident less serious, and he viewed the mother's lawsuit as nonsense, given her use of domestic violence. The courtroom proceedings hardened his view of the girl's mother as someone tough and unforgiving, interested only in money and a forced apology. Then came a devastating turn. Just days before the conference, the boy's father died by suicide. Finally, RJ Ting reached out to his mother, who had started another family after the divorce, to join the conference. The early moment of the conference reflects the deep tensions. The girl's mother avoided eye contact with the boy, her eyes fixed on the floor as the boy described the incident's impacts and his reflections. The most profound moment came when the boy's mother shared the story of her son. She spoke about her son's struggle and the growth and the guilt she felt for not being there for him after her divorce. Her words deeply resonate with the girl's mother, who, as a single parent, has faced similar challenges. The boy's mother spoke about the boy's good performance at school when he was young, his future plans, and how he had to cope with his father's passing. All of these seems to evoke deep emotions in the girl's mother. As the girl's mother revealed in a post-conference interview, she said, "The reason I to forgive the boy was because of his mother's narrative. I'm also a mother. If this happened to my son, I would be very frightened too." The boy should be even more affected because he suddenly lost his father and he had no one to rely on. He wasn't a bad person I had imagined. She continued sharing openly. "In fact, I've also experienced depression. When I was disciplining my children, I was often in and out of hospital, especially when something like this happened suddenly. It was a shock to me. I felt very frustrated. I had dark thoughts and I was in a very bad mood. I couldn't sleep almost every night, wondering why this had happened, even though I've been reminded and educated so many times. That's why I was angry, because I was struggling." By the end of the conference, the boy stood up, bowed deeply, and apologized to the girl and her mother. They accepted his apology, and the girl's mother decided to withdraw the lawsuit. What's more, after the conference, she even asked the facilitators to seek support for the boy, a powerful sign of the emotional transformation she had undergone. The impact on the boy was equally transformative. The boy gained deeper insight, reflecting, "She was in grade 8 and maybe not mature enough. She might have been afraid of refusing me. At the time I waited for her at school, she looked nervous and seemed like she wants to escape. It might have been stressful for her." He also expressed his gratitude for the forgiveness he received, promising to work hard and live up to their expectations, and ensuring such incidents would never happen again. The RJ dialogue also helped heal the relationship between the boy and his mother. During the conference, the boy was moved when his mother cried while recounting his story. He said, "It's obvious my business, but she is more upset than I am. That's what I feel most sorry for." These moments gave them both a chance to reconnect both physically and emotionally, and address the boy's feeling of being let down after their divorce. His mother recalled a time when the boy had asked when he was 10, "It is so difficult for me to have a complete family." And this conference also provided an opportunity for the mother to do something to support the boy. Turn the scene to the relationship between the girl and her mother. As you may recall, they have a long-term strained relationship. How about the situation after the RJ dialogue? In a post-conference interview, the girl told me that she could finally let it go and focus on her future, pursuing her interest and studies. She was able to move on, leaving the event behind her. After the interview, her mother approached us with gratitude, and I invited her to sit down with her daughter. As the facilitator and I quietly stepped away, we saw them laughing and talking over coffee and cake. A simple yet profound moment of reconnection. It was a beautiful reminder of how restorative justice not only addresses immediate conflicts, but also help heal deeper wounds in relationships. After my fieldwork, the ladder of the RJ in Taiwanese juvenile justice has become much clearer. But how exactly does RJ in Taiwan help participants transform these three core elements, shaming, self-reflection, and relationship, from negative to positive? By synthesizing and analyzing various RJ groups, their techniques, and case outcomes, I found that these ladder can be divided into three distinct stages. The first stage, which I call the empathized individual stage, addresses participants' emotions and motivations at their core. Here, facilitator creates a safe space where participants feel truly understood and comfortable expressing themselves, while nurturing their intrinsic motivation to engage in RJ dialogue. This crucial groundwork begins during or even before the pre-conference meeting. In Taiwan, facilitators skillfully blend techniques like trauma-informed approach, motivational interviewing, and narrative therapy. These techniques help participants discover personal meaning in the RJ process and see themselves as protagonists in their own stories. This foundational stage empowered participants to connect with their deeper thoughts and needs, paving the way for what follows. The second stage, which I call the meaningful encounter stage, focuses on authentic dialogue. Here, participants share perspective and truly grasp the incident's impact through conversation. Having built motivation and self-empathy in the first stage, facilitator now guide them toward mutual understanding and empathy. In Taiwan, where stigmatizing shaming often dominates the cultural landscape, some facilitators use nonviolent communication skills to help transform hostile expression into constructive dialogue, helping participants recognize the need behind their emotions. In the final constructive connection stage, we see the transformation bear fruit. Participants who have processed their emotions and gained broader understanding now are more willing to shift perspective and release grievances, and even extend an olive branch. This is typically the stage where sincere apologies, forgiveness, and constructive future plans are created. What's important to note is the sequence of these stages. As shown by my empirical findings, if participants do not feel empathized with in the early stage and are brought together too soon, the encounter may lead to frustration or even harm. And now let's shift to the meso level to explore how RJ is institutionalized in Taiwan's juvenile justice system. Taiwan's Juvenile Justice Act prioritized the sound self-development of juveniles, granting fertile ground for RJ. The 2019 legal reform explicitly embedded restoration into the act, further encouraging RJ practices. In terms of the system, there are two approaches to incorporating the concept of RJ into the current Taiwanese juvenile justice system, in addition to the long-standing traditional trials. One approach is RJ conferencing, also known as RJ dialogue in Taiwanese juvenile justice. This involves diverting cases to a facilitator-led process conducted in a roundtable setting. The focus is on addressing emotional and relational harm through dialogue. The other approach is called the deliberative trial mode, which is an emerging movement in which judges incorporate RJ spirit into courtroom proceedings. As you can see from the picture in the middle, the deliberative trial takes place in the courtroom, but with a very different setup. The judge sits at the same level as the participants around a table, fostering a more equal and collaborative environment. These trials are conducted through open dialogue and actively involve the young person's parents and supporters, such as social workers. The primary goal is to reach a consensus and support the juvenile's reintegration and sound development. So here is my theoretical framework for the meso, which is the institutional level. I propose that the process of pursuing justice is like climbing mountains. Different people may have different peaks they want to reach, representing their diverse needs. And everyone's pathway to the top can vary. Each person's resources and capacities also differ, which means we cannot rely on just one type of justice or a single road to justice. We need multiple pathways. And participants often do not know which path is best for them, which is why guides are essential. These guides include legal professionals at the beginning of the process to help identify the appropriate pathway and support participants in making informed decisions, while social workers provide ongoing support throughout the journey. The concept of qin li fa can act as a navigator, helping to explain the differences between these pathways. Qin li fa is a form of Chinese legal pluralism and a common philosophy in Taiwan, guiding people's interactions and evaluation of justice. Qin represents the emotional and interpersonal aspects of human relationship. Li represents the rational and logical aspects, such as social norms. And Fa represents the law and rules. Each pathways allow for different ratios of Qin, Li, and Fa to be expressed. These pathways may overlap, and people may not need to walk every path to its end. They may also travel together or separately, with the journey offering an opportunity to improve relationship. To sum up, to address my first question, what does restorative justice currently look like in Taiwanese juvenile justice? The finding revealed that restorative justice in Taiwan function as a ladder at a micro level, like guides transformation, and resembled pathways across mountains at a meso level, offering multiple pathways to meet diverse needs. And next, what are the strengths and challenges of the current RJ approach in Taiwan, and how can it be improved? The strength lies in Taiwan's adaptability to locals' needs and its growing integration into the formal justice system. However, challenges remain. There's a lack of clarity about why certain approaches lead to participants' transformation, as facilitators often learn through experience and trial and error. Additionally, blurred boundary between pathways creates uncertainty for both practitioners and participants within the juvenile justice system. To improve, my ladder theory helped clarify the transformation process, while the mountain theory, with the navigator of Qin Li Fa, offers a clearer roadmap for navigating these pathways. For example, restorative justice dialogue could be understood as a Qin and Li focused approach that also welcomes Fa, providing an environment for communication using everyday language and social norms. Deliberative trials offer a balanced approach that integrates Fa, Li, and Qin, following the principle of maximizing Qin and Li as long as it doesn't violate Fa. And the traditional courtroom trials emphasize Fa. Finally, how do Taiwanese experiences and culture inform broader RJ theories and practices? The findings suggest that contextual factors play a significant role in shaping RJ practices in Taiwan. Additionally, while relationality is increasingly embraced in restorative justice, it can also be a double-edged sword, potentially suppressing individuals' voices for the sake of surface harmony. For example, a juvenile victim shared that she apologized immediately after the person responsible did to avoid appearing more at fault, even though she believed the other person was primarily at fault. However, the relational perspective also offers a new lens to view criminal incidents. Though tragic, these incidents can serve as opportunities for those involved to pause, reflect, and untangle knots in relationships, transforming a vicious circle of shaming, self-reflection, and relationship into a virtuous one. And that concludes my presentation. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.
Dr. Chen, thank you so much for this clear, fascinating, inspiring, and innovative presentation. We all have appreciated a lot your efforts to communicate several aspects of restorative justice, also related to tradition, to the main theories and approach concerning restorative justice, the role of storytelling, the role of shame, the role of trauma-informed practice, and emotional transformation. What I have appreciated a lot is the awareness, and we must bear in mind is that justice and conflict resolution is always shaped by multiple factors. So it is very hard to find the right pathway without taking into consideration all the factors that may affect the experience of justice. And I also observed the strength, the potential of storytelling through your presentation, because storytelling and sharing memories, not finding a unified memory, which is good for both the parties, may have a transformative effect at emotional level. According to the European perspective, the offense has also an emotional and psychological impact on people, not only on the direct parties, but also to their families, to the stakeholders, to person who is psychologically close to the parties. And from your presentation, we have realized how much is important to involve the right stakeholders in conflicts, because in this way we can overcome the rigidity, the structure of the trial process, of the trial, in which we are concentrating only on facts, on proofs. But in a restorative justice program, we can take into consideration lots of situation and emotional dimension that have no relevance in the trial process. When we have only to make a decision, which is a top-down decision, and not a community-based effort to overcome the disruptive effects of conflicts. So, in short, I think like a lot, also the images of justice like climbing, and the difficulty to know in advance which path is best for the parties, but for the people affected from a conflict. Once again, thank you so much. Do you have any consideration, or would you like to add something after my not very good tentative to summarize your beautiful presentation? And then we will stop the recording, but please stay with us for some questions and answers that will be not recorded. Would you like to add something, Dr. Chen?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. Professor Garcia Mazzoni so beautifully summarized my presentation. And yes, I really echo with you that storytelling is really powerful. And I also attend some RJ conference and really touched by the story. And that's true that storytelling is also the core of the restorative justice. So I also encourage that we as a researcher in the field of restorative justice, I encourage and invite everyone that can consider that include storytelling into our research. And I also agree with you that the RJ process is good to. There are a lot of multiple factors that need to be taken into account. So it's just a one pathway there and provided for those involved in the conflict to think about whether or not these pathways is suitable for them to meet their diverse needs. And that's my thought.
Thank you so much. We started with Australia and New Zealand, and we are going to conclude with Asia, and we go through Europe, Africa, and the Americas. And this remarkable journey across 5 continents to explore justice, we have delved into themes, topics, experiences, philosophical approaches, legal models, legislation, tradition, and cultures, and also languages. We have uncovered theories and practices, celebrated their success, but also acknowledged the challenges, the failures, and reflected on both the potential and limitation of the restorative justice paradigm. In essence and in short, we have embraced the complexity and beauty of the world in which justice is one of the fundamental anthropological experience that affect everyday life of everyone. Most important, we have the privilege to meeting extraordinary individuals, our 10 distinguished guests from all over the globe, enrich your knowledge, our knowledge, our awareness of restorative justice and justice perspective. You all will be invited to become honorary members of the Center for Restorative Justice and Mediation Study, continuing to serve as invaluable references and sources of inspiration for all of us. This is just, I can say, this is just the beginning of a dialogue that I hope will flourish, driven by our collective wish for knowledge and education and restorative justice. This journey is open to our PhD students who are entrusted with shaping the justice of the future. We are also delighted to announce that all the 10 lectures will be soon available on the YouTube channel of the Restorative Justice Center. And these resources can be shared widely with anyone you believe would benefit from find inspiration in this series. So thank you once again so much for accepting our invitation, being with us, and offering your deep knowledge on this topic. And thank you to all the students in this room and all the participants online. I would like to have close to me Alice Angelini. Without her, nothing could have been possible. She offered, Alice, please come close to me for if you want to say something to our guests. So thank you, Professor Panozzi, and thank you to all our distinguished guests for your relations that are very thought-provoking and very interesting for us, and very important for the progress on restorative justice. Thank you so much. Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Alice, for your support and for your smile, which makes everything lighter and joyful. I can conclude the registration and we will continue to talk online. Okay, now we are operators.